Welcome in. This is Ira Schoffel, managing editor of Warchant.com, the Florida State website on the Rivals Network. I'm joined today by Kelly Quinlan, who's the publisher of JacketsOnline, which is the Georgia Tech website on the Rivals Network. And I guess you can assume what we're here to talk about today is the season opening game for both teams, Saturday at 3:30 p.m. on ABC. We're finally getting to do this, Kelly. I don't know if you expected this was actually going to happen, and fingers crossed that it actually does happen, but we're getting close to a season kickoff game. How has this offseason been for you, and how much are you looking forward to maybe seeing college football in person?
I mean, I think it's been long. I think that's the way that everyone's kind of termed all of this. It's been this kind of long, dragged out process. Will they, won't they? Are we going to get to play? Are they going to be able to figure out the protocols and all the stuff to keep kids safe? And then also just the, pressures outwardly from media and different people kind of pushing various agendas both ways about whether we're going to play. I mean, it's just been the most insane offseason in my 20 years of covering college football. So I'm just excited to see some games. I think we got a little bit of a taste last week and sort of the week before of the weirdness of these games with the e-whistles and all that stuff. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the other weird kinks are going to be as we start to see these games. Before we started, we were joking about the press boxes and what that's going to be like and all that. I think it's just going to be a strange environment for everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be I think Florida State's going to have fans. I know some schools aren't going to have fans this year. Florida State's going to have 25% capacity, which I think is going to be about 19,000 fans. I heard it's going to be about 4,000 students. The rest will be boosters and season ticket holders. They're not going to pump in noise because they feel like those 20,000, 19,000 fans are going to be enough. But there won't be anybody else on the sideline. It's just going to be the teams. The marching band, the marching chiefs are going to be in the stands. As you said, the press box, we're going to be spread out. We won't be able to go down to field level before or after the game. So it's going to be a big adjustment. Talking about and in this conversation, we're going to speak about both teams. So if you're a Florida State fan or a Georgia Tech fan, you're going to hear about each of these teams and the other perspectives. I want to start off, Kelly, asking you about year two under Jeff Collins. I'm sure this is something that you get asked about all the time when you do radio appearances or on your message boards. It's obviously everybody knew it was going to be a tough transition from Paul Johnson's style of football to what Jeff Collins wants to do on both sides of the ball. And it was the results bared that out. They went 3-9 last year and had some really tough losses. What's the expectation in year two? What do you think will be different for Georgia Tech in year two?
I think that the offensive line's made tremendous strides. I think the defensive lines improved. Last year they had a defensive line where they had lost the four main guys who had played the year before. And everyone they brought back, they had one guy who had played maybe 100 snaps. So, that's pretty tough to kind of get past. And they had switched from a 3-4 back to a 4-3. There was a lot of issues on that side of the ball. The offensive line was pretty terrible at times. Just the transition from going from cutting guys and doing the stuff in space that you did in Paul Johnson's offense to what Dave Patno, the offensive coordinator, with a traditional style offensive line. It's going to be interesting to see what the how far they progressed, right? Because they look good in practice, they look good going against their own guys, but it's one of those things you can't tell until you line up against someone else. And obviously Florida State has some dynamic defensive linemen, so it's a huge kind of test right off the bat. There's no warm-up. You're not playing Gardner Webb, who's originally on the schedule, or Northern Illinois, I think, was on the schedule. You're playing Florida State. So it's a big jump, even with a new coaching staff and a new defense there. The quarterback situation was obviously the other thing that really stunk last year, that just had a lot of trouble throwing intermediate passes. Everything was kind of a home run ball or nothing. And that really made them pretty one-dimensional in the passing game. And, the quarterbacks are going to be totally different. James Graham finished last season. I don't know that he will play in this game on Saturday. I think the two freshmen, Jeff Sims and Tucker Gleason, are the most likely guys to see playing time. It's been this kind of long transition as they tried to find the pieces. They have a nice running game. They have okay receivers, okay tight ends. And then defensively, the safeties are the strength of the team. The corners are pretty good. They're good in the back end. It's that front seven, front six and how those guys play is really going to determine the kind of season Georgia Tech's going to have. And I guess kind of my question to you then would be like, what is the difference now with Norvell? I mean, it's a similar system in some ways, but it seems, at least from my perspective and kind of looking at it, and knowing Willie Taggart like I did, this is a just 180 in terms of the type of coach and personality and what they're trying to do, even if the systems have some similarities.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I think from an offensive approach, I mean, the way Mike Norvell describes it is a pro-style offense with tempo. So it's not a straight-up spread offense. He does want to do some more traditional, with the fullback and tight end, and he'll use his tight ends a lot. And it's a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more of a traditional offense, but with a fast tempo. But you're right. I mean, where the biggest change is in terms of just the coaching philosophy, how they practice, how things are organized. I think one mistake Willie Taggart made, I think, when he got the job, is he was told over and over and over about how negative things were in the program towards the end of Jimbo Fisher's tenure, and that he had to get these kids to like him and believe in him and believe in the program again. And so I think he really tried to win guys over. And the problem with that was I don't think they really respected him, and I just don't feel like there was a lot of I don't say they feared the coaching staff, but they just didn't. They weren't going to sell out for the coaching staff. They weren't going to lay it on the line. They didn't push themselves more than they were comfortable pushing. It was very comfortable. Practices were comfortable. Everything was comfortable. And Mike Norvell, and I think in this staff, try to make things uncomfortable. It's a little bit more of an old style approach. And I think the players have bought in. That can be risky. Sometimes you see a coaching staff come in like that, and you see a bunch of kids leave. And they've had a few here and there. But for the most part, I think these kids were really hungry to see some success. They know what didn't work, and they're trying to find some success. So I think that's the biggest difference. I don't think it's about there will be some changes scheme standpoint, but I think what Mike Norvell's hoping for is that those things off the field are going to translate to some success on the field. So we'll see. Go ahead.
So to get to like a point, I guess publicly there was a huge perception of kind of some weirdness with the program, with the players speaking out. They had two kind of different incidents with that. Was that just sort of the pushback of the different styles of communication and all that? It seemed like it kind of blew over very quickly, so maybe it wasn't as serious as it initially outwardly looked. But just was that kind of that transition piece?
It was very serious in the moment, no question, both of them, particularly the Marvin Wilson one. The later one with Warren Thompson, not as much, because Warren Thompson isn't seen the same way Marvin Wilson is seen. And Warren Thompson had left the program once before, so he's always been seen as kind of a wild card. Marvin Wilson is the leader of the team, somebody everybody on the team respects and likes. So when he came after Mike Norvell publicly, that was a big deal. I don't know if it was so much about the pushback to the change of approach as it was, I think that was more of a byproduct of what happened this offseason, and the fact that, Norvell and his staff came in December, and then early March that everybody has to leave. So really they got 2.5 months of together time. Then they're sent home for 2 or 3 months. Then they come back in June, and right when they come back, all of the racial stuff breaks nationally. Everybody's emotional, and they haven't spent that time building those relationships. So when Marvin Wilson saw what Mike Norvell said, which was, he misspoke. Mike Norvell apologized for misspeaking. Marvin Wilson, I think, just kind of it boiled over because of the moment and because, they didn't have that trust built. But I think Norvell did a great job of that, of admitting his mistake, getting the kids to realize he didn't have any bad intentions. He wasn't trying to mislead anybody. And that smoothed over pretty quickly. The Warren Thompson one did as well, and that was a little bit different. That was the other side of it, whereas Mike Norvell had to be the one willing to accept Warren Thompson's apology, because Warren Thompson didn't really know what he was talking about when he went on social media and made his allegations. So, I think both of those, though, at the end of the day, are a result of just not having that trust because they didn't have spring practice and it was a new coaching staff. And that's going to be something to watch, though. I do feel like these guys, from everything we've heard, they bought in and they've welcomed the staff. But, it's probably not as ingrained from a trust standpoint as you would have at a program where the coach has been there for several years. So, it's definitely something to watch. I was going to ask you about the transfer. Florida State's had a bunch of transfers come in this year. They had Miko Dotson and Jarian Jones, a defensive back. They've got a couple of defensive ends, defensive linemen came back. One guy from Louisville, another guy from Deontay Williams from Baylor, defensive end. They've had, I guess 7 or 8 different guys, right tackle, Devontae Love-Taylor. But Georgia Tech's had some big-time transfers in as well. I was curious, are they expected to be an instant kind of – that's what we expect with transfers, especially from bigger schools. What kind of impact do you think some of those guys will make?
So the big one that came in this cycle was Ryan Johnson, who's an offensive guard from Tennessee. He really gives them some nice kind of steadiness there. He's going to play next to a true freshman, Jordan Williams, at right tackle, so that he kind of is that anchor for that guy who's playing. And it's tough to play on the edge, right, as offensive tackle as a true freshman. It also sort of illustrates the offensive line situation when you have a grad transfer at right guard and a true freshman at right tackle, how much they're trying to adapt there. Those guys are kind of the two big ones off the top of the Ryan's the big one off the top of this year, and then Antonius Clayton, who was at Florida, was a 5-star recruit, just couldn't get healthy, couldn't contribute regularly there. Transferred to Georgia Tech, should have got a waiver last year, didn't get to play, was a huge kind of loss for the program. He's going to step up. He's had a great camp, really turned it on. A guy that would like to play in the NFL is really kind of pushing that, and he's kind of an X-factor guy, right? If he can live up to even some of that 5-star potential, that's a difference maker defensive end. The other guy who you're going to see a lot of is Marquez Ezard, who went to Miami and is from Atlanta, transferred back home after Coach Rick left. And Ezard's a dynamic receiver. He's good in space. He's also a punt return guy, so you'll get to see a bit of him. Those are sort of the main transfer guys that you're going to see a lot of as this goes on. It's funny you mentioned Miko, because Miko started his career at Georgia Tech.
That's right.
As a recruit, and I knew him really well, and I think it was just kind of a weird fit for him, and he left, and he has had quite the journey. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting seeing him on Saturday too.
Yeah, he's been to about 4 different schools or something like that. Yeah, and then he maybe this might be his 5th, because he went to junior college and he was hurt. He's had a. Doesn't look like he's going to start, but I definitely think he's going to play a lot. One other thing on that note about the roster, though, Mike Norvell's mentioned this like 2 or 3 times about how the roster looks different in terms of players' body sizes. Has that been a noticeable difference when you look at like heights and well, I guess not heights, but weights across the roster?
So Jeff Collins had something called the 10-10 Club in the offseason. It was 10 pounds and 10 inches, 10 yards, and 10 something or others that they wanted the guys to gain, right? That was the difference between them going to a bowl and not going to a bowl last year. They had a couple of games where they just needed 1 more yard here, not to fumble the ball or whatever. Temple game, Citadel, a couple other ones. So that was kind of a big focus for them. And Jeff said that they've grown a lot. The offensive line is probably a couple inches taller and 20, 30 pounds heavier than they were when he got here, just because the difference in body types. The defensive line's gotten a lot bigger. Really, the big thing there has been the height. They've recruited a lot of height and length. That's something that Jeff's very big on. They kind of develop those bodies, right? Like build them up. So they have a lot of guys who are 6'6", 6'5", that are some of those guys are going to redshirt, but then you have like Clayton and some of these other guys, Ryan Johnson, that are big guys they've added into the program. So to me, yeah, it's been a pretty dynamic makeover, especially in the offensive line, and then also adding the tight end position, which didn't have it all. So you have a bunch of 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" guys that are in the mid 230s, that can move, and that makes huge difference on things like kickoff, and that was kind of my beef with Paul Johnson. I respected Paul a lot, but I didn't understand, a lot of other programs that ran his offense were using the tight end, and he just was vehemently opposed to it. And those guys are really helpful, especially in special teams, to have those body types, because otherwise you're just stuck using linebackers, and they were thin there anyways. So they've done a nice job kind of making the transition piece. I think it's going to be interesting to see, how this kind of goes forward. I'm curious on Florida State's end, just kind of the quarterback situation and the offense and how it looks. For disclosure to your viewers, I own our USF site, so I have guys who cover them, and I was very familiar with Willie and what they ran and all that stuff. And I also knew a little bit about Norvell and have watched his offense and admired that at Memphis. I'm curious kind of how that transition's gone with Blackman and those guys in that competition. And then obviously Florida State always has skill guys on offense. So just kind of talk about their adaptation to the Memphis style.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to feel, I think for FSU fans, I think it's going to feel closer to maybe a little bit closer to what Jimbo is doing with the tempo than what, certainly what Florida State did last year, with Kendall Briles. And for the player standpoint, one of the things with, it seemed like with Kendall's offense is they would get off to these great starts. They had, their few base plays, and they would have success early. And then when the other team kind of figured it out or settled down and could handle the tempo, they would just they couldn't do anything. They couldn't even move the ball. And you'd see these big leads. In 2 or 3 games, they had, 20, 24-point leads just evaporate in a few seconds, because then when they did play, they were going at such a fast tempo. From what we've heard, I think that they're going to run the ball a little bit more than certainly more than we've seen over here a little bit, even though Cam Akers was really good. It wasn't an offense where they ran the ball 30 or 35 times usually. So I think there's going to be a little bit more of the running game. They've totally revamped the offensive line. Basically all new guys. There's 2 guys who started most of last year, Dante Lucas, who was a true freshman playing at guard. He's back at guard. And Bavion Johnson played center. He's moved to guard, which I think is a better fit for him. But the other 3 guys will basically be new starters in the offensive line, including a grad transfer. So I think there's some hope that maybe the offensive line will be a little bit better. James Blackman is the $1 million question because, at the end of last season, when they lost, the way he played, particularly in the bowl game, I think FSU fans were thinking, okay, this maybe he's going to find a new home. You got a new coaching staff. Maybe they'll start over. But he ended up staying and really buying in, and he seems to really like what they're doing. They've challenged him. They've really challenged him in terms of managing being a leader, managing the team, trying to get guys to play better around him instead of worrying about himself. I think that's one thing James has done is he's very self-focused, and he gets down on himself sometimes, and he's had to learn how to be better at that. We'll see how that works in the game itself. But they do have a lot of good skill, as you mentioned. I mean, everybody knows Tamarian Terry is a Georgia kid, and obviously has been a big play guy. They also brought in Jayshon Corbin at running back, who's a Texas A&M transfer who I think they have real high hopes for. It seems very clear-cut. He's the best running back they have. Brought in a junior college running back named LaDamian Webb, who was the state player in Alabama 2 or 3 years ago in high school. So they've got some – and then, Warren Thompson is back, as we talked about earlier. Keyshawn Helton is back from injury in the slot. They do have some weapons. I think really everybody just wants to see the offensive line. Can it be better? And is James Blackman taking that step? He's never going to be a guy that completes 70% of his passes and just, meticulously makes every right decision and right read. He's going to be kind of a high risk, high reward guy. But I think the biggest thing FSU fans want to see, and really a key to their success, is can he get past those mistakes and move on and win the next play? I think there was a lot of hope that one of the true freshmen that came in might be able to compete for the starting job. Tate Rodemaker from Valdosta had a nice camp. I don't know physically if he's ready to play a lot for Florida State this year. And then Chubba Purdy from Arizona, 4-star guy that was previously committed to Louisville, is really talented, but he's out. He has a broken collarbone, so he won't be back till later in the season. Then Jordan Travis, who people have seen FSU play, they saw him more of as a running guy, a wildcat guy. He'll be available as well. I think they'll have packages for him. So I don't think it'll be James Blackman every play, but their success or failure this year, I think a lot of it on offense is going to come down to James. I think talking about quarterbacks, though, you knew this question was coming. Every FSU fan is starting to wonder if they're going to see Jeff Sims, who was committed to Florida State for a long time and really, honestly, was kind of the recruiting coordinator for FSU in that 2020 class. He did a really good job of kind of getting that class together before it ended up him bowing out and then committing to Georgia Tech. Do you expect – I mean, it sounds like you definitely expect him to play. Do you think he's going to be the main guy Saturday? And what have you heard about Jeff Sims adjusting to college?
So Jeff, we got to watch spring practice. So Georgia Tech got 6, 7 practices in. Jeff, had a little bit of a curve there in the spring in terms of learning just where to go with the ball and seeing the field and stuff. And you could start to see it change a little bit as those practices went on, him getting more comfortable with the offense and starting to get the ball downfield and be more comfortable in the pocket. He's totally changed in the fall. He took all the downtime that happened and learned the playbook really well and what to do, and has been really comfortable. And according to the coaches and stuff, looks great. And I joked when Florida State jumped onto the schedule that it would be the greatest irony would be to start him at quarterback in that game, and Avery Boyd, who's a receiver from Tallahassee, they recruited. I was like, you have him throw like a pass to him as the first play of the game. It was just funny. And someone said to me, they're like, we'll see. It was a little more of I was kind of joking at the time because it was early on in camp, and I thought Tucker Gleason would be the guy. He was from Tampa. He was the first guy they recruited at quarterback from the jump when they got the job from playing high school. Just has all the tools to run this offense. He was committed forever. And Jeff was kind of taken because they had an opportunity to get another quarterback, and he was interested in coming, and I guess didn't feel the vibe from Norvell or whatever, and whatever happened there happened. And they got Jeff, which was a great pickup, and added competition, which is the big thing Jeff Collins enjoys. So, if I were a betting man, I'd bet on Jeff to be the guy, and I think it would be a great story. And, the one kind of X factor, and I talked to Dave Patno, the offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech this week, is there's no real fan situation. Like, it's not like going to be hostile like you would normally have, especially playing at Florida State or Clemson or whatever for a young quarterback. And the way every coach I've talked to, whether it's at Georgia Tech or other places, is kind of looking at the season is we're going to get whatever number of games we get in. We're not guaranteed to get all 11 in. Let's roll the dice. Let's play some kids. Let's try some things and be adventurous a little bit and not be as in our shell. You might see Jeff. You might see, Tucker Gleason. You could see Jordan Mason. You could see James Graham. You could see – the offensive coordinator said he has a guy and he wants to play one guy. They haven't said who it is. I have my suspicions. I have what I hear. But, you never know, too. Like, sometimes people try to blow smoke and, kind of throw you off the trail. Last year, it was all about Lucas Johnson was going to be the quarterback at Georgia Tech, and then they go out to play Clemson, and Tobias Oliver takes the first snap and plays almost the entire game. So, to me, I think that the big story would be if Jeff plays, and I think it'd be a fun story, especially if he plays well. And he's sort of a mirror in a lot of ways of Blackman in terms of physically and kind of what they look like. He's probably a little bit better runner. But, to me, like, why not play him? Why not play Tucker? Like, what do you got to lose, You're already going into the game as between a 10.5 and a 13-point dog to Vegas. Like, no one expects anything from you. So let's see what these kids can do. Give them an opportunity. And if you feel okay about your offensive line, I think it's, okay. I think if it was last year and the offensive line was as, in poor shape as it was a year ago, maybe you don't do that. But I think they're a little more comfortable now with that. I guess the other kind of main thing I'm curious about, too, on Florida State is defensively there were a lot of struggles despite all of that talent. And you talked about blowing leads, and I certainly saw it watching some games last year for Florida State. I'm curious kind of what the approach has been and how different this scheme is and what kind of the learning curve has been there, and then also the focus on trying to finish games and not just play like a good quarter or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be it's going to be a good thought experiment, I think, to see what happens with Florida State football defensively, because I think there's definitely two perceptions in the world. There's the perception of the Florida State fan base, and I think the media that cover Florida State, that you look at that talent and you listen to these coaches, and that one of the big problems they had last year was that the defensive staff really was running a defense they didn't want to run. Willie Taggart wanted them to run a 3-4. I personally believe it was because he thought Jim Leavitt was going to be coming into the program at some point, and that's what they wanted to run when they made that transition. That never really happened. Leavitt ended up coming in as an analyst, but not as the coordinator. But they made that move to a 3-4. I don't think Harlan Barnett, the defensive coordinator, wanted to run it. I don't think the players wanted to run it. And so it it backfired. It was a disaster. So I don't think so I think most FSU fans and people around the program, you take that and you just say, well, we can't look at any of the results from that defense and say that that's indicative of what they could be. But at the same time, I think to the rest of the world, you look at them on paper and say, well, you're not 90th in the country in total defense. Why are people saying that this defense is going to be the strength of this team? They didn't play well in any area really last year. Marvin Wilson, everybody knows he's a really good player, but it's not like that defensive line was great all season. The linebackers were not good. The secondary gave up a ton of big plays. And as you said, they didn't finish games. So there's two realities. And I think I think the people on the outside are going to go into this game thinking we're going to see that these FSU people are delusional, or the FSU people are going to go in and feel vindicated because the defense really plays really well. I can see both sides. I like this defensive coaching staff. I think the talent is definitely there. A wild card to it all, I think the big question a lot of us had was, even if you thought this could be a better defense, was a defensive end, because they don't have a proven pass rusher. They haven't been able to get after the quarterback since Brian Burns left from the defensive end spot. But Josh Kando has kind of resurrected his career. I mean, he's a guy that battled a lot of injuries, was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, and just hasn't produced because of injuries and other reasons. Well, now he's apparently had an unbelievable camp. They're saying he was the guy that they let smash the rock at the end of preseason camp. He was like the MVP of preseason camp. If he turns out to be what he was supposed to be out of high school, then that's a big deal. And put him with Marvin Wilson, and they also, another defensive line transfer they got was Fabian Lovett out of Mississippi State, who started like 12 games there last year as a redshirt freshman. So, I think the defense is going to be good, but I also understand people who are questioning that because of, they just haven't proven it in a long time. Last question I want to ask you was, FSU fans, this is more of a big picture thing. FSU fans have hated the divisions forever because they want to play Georgia Tech. I mean, there's a lot of FSU fans in that city, a lot of alumni live in Atlanta. It's obviously an easy trip for a lot of FSU fans. It's much more desirable than going to different parts of the Northeast. Is it reciprocated? Do Georgia Tech? Because I do think all of this is going to be revisited now because of the virus, and we're seeing schedules change and everything else. And this game got added at the last minute. Do Georgia Tech fans want Florida State on the schedule more often, or do they not really care?
No, they like to play Florida State. And
there's been great. The rivalry's been awesome through the years. I mean,
yeah, and there've been some amazing games. Think about the Lightning game, which was the last game that Georgia Tech played at the Doak in 2009. You had the ACC championship games, which were super close, despite Georgia Tech maybe not being on the same level that year as Florida State was. And then the kick game up here in 2015, where Georgia Tech was having a terrible season with just beset by injuries and basically ruined that poor kicker's career. I mean, it was never the same. Like, it was sort of amazing, like how that just it just derailed that guy who was a machine kicking the football. And so they want to play. I mean, the thing is, like, it sucks. Georgia Tech, and the way the crossover things work, they play Clemson every year, which is insane, and they're playing Georgia as their SEC rivalry game. So you're playing two top 5, top 10 programs every single year. You're not playing Florida State regularly. You're not playing NC State. You're not playing Wake. Whereas Virginia Tech's playing Boston College as a crossover. And I think it sucks, the way they set it up. I'm almost in favor of, in some ways, just taking the old ACC teams, making that a division, and then making all the Big East teams that basically make up the rest of the league into their own division and let it play out that way with no permanent rivals. But, I think Virginia people would get upset with that because they want to play Virginia Tech. And there's a couple of rivalry games like that. But it's weird. Wake Forest doesn't play North Carolina, and they have had to schedule non-conference games to play them just so that kids would play during their 6 years in school. They would actually play North Carolina once. I mean, I've been to every stadium in the league except for Syracuse and Boston College. Boston College, Georgia Tech, the one time they've in the 11 years I've been covering them, played in Ireland. Georgia Tech and Boston College played the game in Ireland instead of in Chestnut Hill. And then Syracuse have never been to. That was the game on the schedule this year, and I'm not sure if I will go just because I don't want to particularly get on an airplane right now. But it just sucks. Like, you don't see enough of the league. You play the same couple of teams over and over again. Um, not playing Florida State since 2015 seems insane to me. Like, and they weren't going to play this year. That's the other thing. This was just sort of a fluke of all this. I think if you're going to keep the permanent things, I think you need to add a game to the league, or you need to. I almost feel like the divisions, they don't make sense as it is, and you can't make a South and North division just because the football is too different, right? Like, unless you just make it where it doesn't count, like towards who goes ACC championship. So I think if you have like Clemson, Miami, Georgia Tech, and Florida State all playing each other, that's sort of a disadvantage for those teams playing a more competitive football than, say, Boston College and Syracuse and Pitt playing each other. So I don't know what the answer is, but it doesn't work. Like, I've been an advocate for a long time of trashing this format and coming up with something else, because to me it just sucks that you don't have these teams playing each other on a more regular basis. It shouldn't take 5-6 years to get to where you play Louisville or Florida State. And I get it. If you're Florida State fans, it's an easy trip, right? It's one of the few easy trips you have in the league. Really, it's the only easy trip you have in the league that's like drivable, like super easily. Maybe Miami and Clemson are. But like, that's crazy. Like, why are you playing all these games against BC and Syracuse or whatever? Like, that's insane. Like, I just don't get it. And I think that maybe people need to re-examine all of this stuff. Honestly, when this all happened, I come up with a scenario to just toss out all of the conferences and go like hyper regional and have a league where there's good teams, there's decent teams, and then there's some mediocre teams. So you have all the Florida teams play each other every year. It would bring those teams up a little bit, and it would make the football a little more interesting, and then go into a real playoff where you play, maybe you have 8 teams or whatever it is, 10 teams play each other, the champions from each of those things in a wild card or two play each other, right, and move from there. Because I think it's getting too weirdly like hyper focused on these couple of conferences, really, the ACC, the SEC, and the Big Ten, and then everyone else is kind of on the outside looking in. And I don't think it's good for college football. Like, I think you lose a lot, and I think it would be a lot more interesting if Florida and Florida State were in the same league playing each other, and Georgia Tech were in the same league playing each other, and there was a little more on the line in those games too.
Yeah, well, the problem, I think, we used to talk to Jimbo a lot about this when he was here off the record, and one of the things that his argument was, well, it would be great to reconfigure things, but the problem is the SEC and the Big Ten have such an advantage now in terms of money that why would they, they've got no interest at all in reconfiguring things. But because of the virus and everything that's happened and the world changing, maybe it does open the door for some of that. It's definitely a good conversation. What do you any thoughts on the game? Do you do a prediction before the game? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I'll give you a prediction. I think that Florida State covers. I'm pretty realist about this stuff. I just think that there's a lot of unknowns for Georgia Tech. They just have so many young pieces and stuff. I think they will score some points. My guess would be, a 31-17, something like that. Like, maybe 35-17, something like that. Like, I think that Georgia Tech's still a little bit, still playing catch up a little bit in terms of things. But it's so hard to gauge, especially if you have a true freshman playing quarterback. What is he going to look like? How settled in is he going to be? And then the tackling's been sort of insane watching these games too. So, like, is it going to be a game like the one in 2009 that there was like no punts in the game?
Florida State had to punt one time, and that's why they lost.
Yeah, exactly. That was Georgia Tech's played a lot of games like that over the years where they get into these shootout games. Not with Jeff yet, but will it be one of those games? I think everything's so weird, and then you also don't know who's out with contact tracing or virus stuff, and every coach is being super secretive about that stuff in the ACC. They've agreed not to release that info. So it's like, you're going to show up and, Marvin Wilson's not playing. Like, that changes the dynamic, and, God forbid. But, like, that's the kind of stuff that we don't know about. And like why I have some friends who are degenerate gamblers. I'm like, I would not bet on this season at all. Just send me your money. Like I'll hold it for you for the next, and charge you like a small vig on it, because like it'll be a lot easier than losing money on these games when like the star running back's out or something.
It's just, they should have a camera, like those reaction videos where people watch like a scary scene or something. They should have cameras for like bettors' faces when they realize like the star running back's not playing. And like, what? It's just going to be yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we're going to make predictions because that's what we all do. But I think all the uncertainty this year, these two particular teams, it's going to be difficult because you have a first-year coaching staff and a second-year coaching staff that had such an upheaval. But then you add into it all these other issues. It's a big question. I think Florida State's going to win. If I believe in the defense, I think it's going to be a lower-scoring game. I think Florida State's going to win like maybe 24-10, 24, maybe 27-17, something like that. I don't think Florida State's going to be too wide open on offense because I think Mike Norvell's going to try to your point, I get your point that you made about Georgia Tech is like, let it go. Just none of this matters. There's nothing to lose. Just do what you can do. I think there's a little bit more on the line for Mike Norvell because he's a new coach, doesn't have a track record here, wants to win over some recruits, wants to win over some boosters and season ticket holders. So I think he might play it a little more close to the vest. But that's just my theory. I could be totally wrong and off in hand. Well, Kelly, man, I really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the game Saturday from a distance.
Yep.
Wearing our masks. And thanks for taking some time to talk to us. And if you want more Georgia Tech coverage, check out JacketsOnline.com. Kelly and his guys have been doing a great job there forever. And Warchant.com for Florida State coverage. Both part of the Rivals Network. You can read each other's stories if you're a subscriber to one and the other. You just can't get on our message boards and troll anybody. You got to sign up for your own account. Anyway, thanks again, Kelly. Talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks, Ira.
Thanks, man.